Why is there a review channel on almost every corner in this community? I'll tell you why. Let's talk about Boys in the Hood.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. Today, Hervey is going to be introducing what we're going to be discussing or debating about.
Yeah, so today we're discussing the movie Boys in the Hood. It's a 1991 movie directed and written by John Singleton, and it essentially follows the lives of three young males living in Crenshaw ghetto of Los Angeles, and it's essentially sort of dissecting questions about race, relationships, violence, and future prospects of the young males living in this particular neighborhood. I've seen it quite a few times. I know Jonathan's seen it a few times as well. Daniel, this is your first time viewing this movie. Do you want to tell the
It
people
is.
what your experience was?
So I had heard of this movie, but I didn't know anything about it. It seemed kind of like, I'm not even sure how to categorize it, but it kind of like, if you just see the poster and like the title and whatever, there's like a whole genre of movies that look a little bit like this, like from the 90s, right? And that's pretty much the extent of my knowledge. So when you suggested this, I went in completely blind, had no idea what it was about. Overall, I had a really good time with this movie. I generally don't like slice of life movies. I like movies to be punchy to the point. A linear, straightforward story is something I like in general, and slice of life is just the exact opposite of that. And this is a slice of life movie, right? This shows the life of these boys, teenagers, and then later men in this neighborhood, and what their life is like, and what challenges they face, and just the rules by which they live, and how they interact with the rest of the world. There's not much of a plot here, right? There's a little bit of one, but mostly it's just episodes, right? And just experiences they have. Considering that the movie, just in terms of style, just had a big uphill battle with me, I was really surprised by how much of a good time I had with this. And I think it came down primarily to, even though it is like a slice of life, it is not like every scene serves a purpose and every scene makes a point. And the performances are strong enough that you care about these characters and you want to see what happens to them, and you want to see what they do, and you feel for them when they make a mistake, and you're happy for them when they do something right. And I think that is how you do that. And I don't think I've seen another slice of life movie that did this. They almost all bore me to tears, and this one didn't for some reason. So overall, I had a really good experience with it.
As I was actually rewatching it, I was concerned about that aspect of it, just because there wasn't a overarching plot in the movie. There wasn't anything particularly driving it, and it was slice of life. So I was a little bit concerned. As I was rewatching it, I was like, "Is this something that would resonate with you, or something that would be of interest to you?" So it's really good to hear that you did enjoy it. What was it about the characters, and what was it about the story that kept you engaged throughout?
It's hard to really point to anything specific. I can't point to one character and says, oh, this person is just really interesting or something like that. They're just regular people, and that's the point. It is more like the performances are so good that these characters really brought to life. And even though they're all very similar, right? They have like the same background, same age. It's like there's not much to really set them that much apart. But each one is brought to life by the performance, I think. I think that is what holds this whole thing together.
And just to bring in Jonathan as well, what was your experience rewatching it, Jonathan?
I think one of the main things that I liked about this film was kind of like the insight, because a lot of the times as black people there, especially people within like that live in like estates or just pretty much like hoods or just, underdeprived like type of environments. Did I say that right? I just assume I said that right. I just tried to sound smart there. But a lot of the times they say that is very similar. Like we're all going through the same things. And after watching that during the time, I was like, no, that's not very true. And obviously I started watching more movies. I think like, of different countries, like in South Africa was like over there, movies, etc., etc. And you can kind of see like the big differences of what, just like different black people face. We all still face struggle. Of course, I feel like we all face it differently, like the severity of things. So watching Boys in the Hood, I was like, damn. I just felt the struggle mainly. It was just the struggle that they kind of go through. Because it felt like it's hard to kind of like make it out and actually be successful legally if you're living in those type of areas in that film. So that's why I wouldn't say I resonate with the film. I'm thinking, damn, like they actually have it really, really hard out there. Like just urban life in America and what urban life actually looks like, and just like differences in class and just race. And I was just like, pretty much the challenges that they face in the black community. That's what I was more immersed with and kind of like engaging with, and like I said, it was insight for me. So it was definitely an insightful video. I just find these films like entertaining as well as kind of like feeling for the characters, like Daniel was saying. Like it's very hard to kind of like resonate and feel for the characters, but in these situations I was actually feeling for certain of the characters, especially like Ice Cube's character, the way he died 2 weeks later after like burying his brother. I was like, damn. Like, obviously I understood that was coming, because generally that's like the cycle of violence. I understood that was coming.
And I think you kind of touched on essentially what the movie was about, and that was, bringing to life some of the characters or some of the people that come from these environments that are often stereotyped or often cast with the same sort of brush and sort of viewed as all being the same, and without completely understanding their story and understanding the individual story of people living in that neighborhood. And I think that's what the film aimed to highlight, was especially coming out of the crack epidemic of the 80s in that time, and everything that was going on in America during that period. It was quite timely in that manner, in terms of giving a voice or giving life to some of those people that lived in those neighborhoods. So actually, one thing I did want to come back to, what Daniel said, was that you felt like all of the characters were the same. But do you not feel like there was quite significant differences, especially between the three main young males that we're following in this, where you had Tre, who was living with his father and had his father's influence on him in a lot of the decisions and a lot of actions that he was taking. You had Doughboy, who was a representation of someone that had been in and out of the jail system since being a young boy. And then you had Ricky, who had aspirations for, going to college and getting a scholarship, etc. Did you feel those differences, and how did that bring to life the characters in the story, highlighting those, showing those differences in the characters?
Obviously, they're not the same people, right? They have different outlooks on life, they have different goals, they have different priorities, they have different perspectives. What I was just saying earlier is, if everybody kind of comes from the same background, that raises the difficulty a little bit to keep characters apart, right? Or you need to do a little bit more work to really figure out the different characters, as opposed to if everybody in a cast kind of has a different background. Like, that just makes it easier, right? It's kind of like that. If you have a historical drama, you can summarize almost every character by like the serious-looking English guy with long hair. If you have some like Game of Thrones, like that describes like 60% of Game of Thrones characters. That is just something that kind of raises the barrier of entry just a little bit, I thought. And I think it's to the movie's credit that is not an issue with this movie, that they're not all the same people, because they're not, right? And I think that is kind of what the movie lives from, is that they kind of all start off more or less in the same place, but go to different places because of their different outlooks and the different trajectories that they take.
Also, like the trio were like, of course, they were representation of three different ways, like in terms of like where you will end up in life, in terms of like the like career options, for example. Well, not really career options, but just where you're gonna end up in life. Obviously, you had Doughboy. What's his name? Doughboy? Ice Cube's character.
Yeah, Doughboy.
Yeah, obviously, pretty much he's doing the gang banging, and then you've got Ricky, who's solidified in pretty much, he already knows what he wants with his future. He's gonna go to school, try and do football. If not, then obviously he's gonna get into business. And then you've got Ricky. Even though he is aimed to go to school, you can still see he has a side of him that could be influenced in a way. However, he also is a representation of like what it is, like the positive impact of having a father in your life. But I still feel like his character as well represents a lot of people in that type of community. Like, even though you do come from an upbringing, and even though you are trying to go the good way, like the right way in life, you could easily be influenced and going the other way in life. So I feel like those three characters were good representations at that.
Another question for Daniel. So, as someone that maybe isn't as familiar with the area that this is set in, or familiar with kind of growing up in those environments, or being familiar with certain stories, of course, there's bad neighborhoods in everywhere, but they're all uniquely different in their own ways. One thing you do tend to mention about movies that have a certain message is how well does it do to attract a wider audience, or attract people that aren't just directly impacted by the message that's in the movie. How well do you feel like the movie captured the essence of highlighting the issue within the movie to a wide audience?
So I think you do need to bring some things to the table, right? You need to kind of know what the historical and social context is of this neighborhood, right? Like why it is this way, right? I think it does do a good job of kind of explaining kind of where characters are coming from and why they view things the way they do and why they make the choices that they do, right? Like why so many of them don't believe they have a future. And like when was it Ricky is asked by the college guy what he wants to major in, he has no answer because he never thought that far, for example, right? And there's just a whole bunch of examples like this where the dialogue expresses, like, this is kind of one of those screenwriting challenges where characters explain things to each other that they all already know, right? And like nobody, like there's no fish out of water character in this that needs to be explained certain things. So you need to weave it into the dialogue, right? You need to have the dialogue be organic to the fact that they all come from the same community, but you still have to say things to inform the audience, right? Some of these are more elegant than others, but for the most part, they really work. Like there's this scene where Furious goes on this big speech, right, where people disagree about what the problem is with the community and why things are happening the way they are. That is something where it really becomes clear, like where different people are coming from and why they interpret the same facts in different ways. And I think overall the movie does a good job at giving that kind of context if you bring kind of the bare minimum into it.
And that's something, as I was watching it, I was like, you really understand the struggles of coming from something like that environment. You sort of really understand some of the frustrations, some of the hopelessness that people from those environments would feel, where they feel like the options to them are very, very limiting. And even when they do try to escape, so you have things like Tre's father who tried to join the army, thinking that it would sort of lead to a better life, but didn't quite fit in that particular environment and had to sort of come back and sort of rediscover himself. Of course, you had Ricky, who was the aspiring to go to college and play football, but in that particular environment, a bullet doesn't have a name on it, and just because you're associated or you're seen with seen to be with someone, or you have some type of small confrontation, it could quite easily lead to your demise. So I think the movie did an excellent job of highlighting and bringing to life the struggles in there. And I feel like a lot of this movie is very layered, and there's a lot of different topics within the Black community that's handled in here. So one of it is being, having that father figure present in the home, and I think that's explicitly shown in Tre's character, where he's gone. They made the decision that he's going to go live with his father. He's really one of the very few, and I don't think there are many other sort of father figures shown in the movie at all.
Which is the topic of several scenes, right? Like there's that scene where the parents kind of meet up at this restaurant. Riva says something along the lines of, you showed up and that's more than what everybody else is doing, something like that. So that was very clear. There's also whenever he is parenting Tre, you can see kind of how scared he is of messing it up, and he kind of realizes what the stakes are for Tre. What I think this does really well is kind of, it doesn't, like there's one or two big speeches in this, but for the most part there aren't big speeches. It's more like you get 4 or 5 different scenes that reinforce kind of a similar point. I think the parenting and the absence of the fathers is a key example of this.
Mm-hmm. Was there any other things like that you picked out of the movie?
One thing that I was a little bit surprised by is how affluent the parents are. And I'm not entirely sure how that fits into kind of the broader message of the movie, right? So Furious is I think he sells mortgages, right? At least towards the end. I think he switches jobs halfway through, and I'm not sure what he does in the beginning, but towards the end, I think he sells mortgages, right? He's made it his mission to make sure that this community is Black owned, right? That he will not sell a mortgage to anybody else. And then Riva she has some kind of decently high-ranking corporate job, right? Like throughout the movie, kind of her living environment keeps getting better and better, and by the end, it's quite nice, right? So I was a little bit surprised by that. I wasn't expecting everybody to be poor, but they do make a point of this, right? That even having that amount of money still doesn't change really anything. At least that's how it came across to me.
Yeah, I think there's a few things kind of going on within that. So specifically for Tre's father, I think his experience with the army explains why he remained in the area that he remained in the environment that he was in. It's because he tried to step outside of it and realized he wasn't welcome, or realized that he was still treated like as a black man, even when he was trying to do what some Americans describe as the most honorable thing is representing your country and going to fight for your country. But even there, he was treated as different and treated as just a black man. So even though he had a decent job, and he had more money, more money than most of the other people in the community, you can see and understand why he was trying to stay within that, especially for someone of his mindset who was very pro black and pro education and pro trying to help out his community. Again, even with that almost came at the detriment of his son, because one wrong choice, and if he decides to go, with Doughboy and the rest of the gang to commit the murder, then it fits into the cycle of violence that that is in the community. I think the mother was kind of a representation of almost like not giving up in life, because they both had the child very young, and they made a very active decision that she was still going to pursue what she was going to do, pursue her degree and pursue a career. And in doing so, she still understood the risks of, because even when he was living with his mother, which may have been a little bit of a nicer area, you saw at the start of the movie that there was still violence around. Tre was still getting in trouble. He was getting in fights in school, even though he was quite bright and a little bit smarter than the rest. But you could see he was almost like dumbing himself down, like playing the class clown without having the father's influence there. So you can kind of understand her decision in wanting to send him to his father, because that was one thing I did half question in the movie was, if she has all this money, why doesn't he just go and live there? But there still is violence there, and he still needed the influence of his father to really help him grow and actually become a man eventually, and teach him for right from wrong, and put second morals within him. So yeah, I think whilst the kind of element of having money and not was within there, I think the movie still was great in making sure it was multi-layered, and there was lots of depth in what they were doing with that as well, which was great, which I give the movie high praise for.
Yeah, and also it seemed to me like the kind of job she does not leave much time. So he would basically grow up on his own, right? Not just without a father, but just in general without any kind of guidance. And that, following the events of the opening sequence, it seems to me like she kind of came to the conclusion that was not going to be a winning strategy.
Yeah.
Another theme that we could actually speak about, which we haven't really mentioned, which was important, was the police brutality. That black police officer, what was going on there?
Yeah.
That scene between him and Ricky's friend, Tre. I meant Tre, yeah, Tre. The scene between him and the police officer, that scene, I'm sure, was the historical moment. This film, when I say historical, was a historical moment, I mean, obviously, apparently this film it was not given an award, but it was seen as, I forgot how it was recognized, but the film was recognized for something as a cultural, historical moment in cinema or something like that. So yeah, I'm guessing that scene there, when it comes to police brutality, must have been an insight into, okay, so it's not just white police officers which are doing the madness, it's also the black police officers there as well. So what was kind of going through both of your minds when you saw that scene?
That scene, I think, is really powerful, right? So first of all, it starts off by simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Like, it literally starts off with an accident, right? Or I think that one group, that kind of shoulder checking. I don't remember who it was. Maybe Ricky, maybe somebody else. And then the guns come out, and then they disengage, right? Do the responsible thing and de-escalate and just drive away. But that is still not enough. They still get pulled over by the cops, right? And get within, and Trey gets within an inch of just being shot. At that point, it's not even about being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's just pure arbitrary, right? Which is also something that gets reinforced in the closing titles, where we are just told that Doughboy was killed. We don't know how. We don't know why. It's just happened, right? So 2 weeks later, somebody can just be gone, right? And that, I think, that was really reinforced in the scene. And obviously, it's not genius analysis to point out that they made sure that it was a black cop, right? It was not this. In general, there are no external factors in this, right? It's all internal. I think that is I think the thing that surprised me the most about this movie is that its entire thesis is that black problems are self-caused or self-exacerbated, or there's all this self-sabotage going on that's holding back the community, which is a point of view I've heard many times, but it seems to always be like a minority. It doesn't seem to be a popular point of view for obvious reasons, right? But this entire movie is that.
And with the black cop, so that's kind of something that, having understood the culture was something that I was aware of, is that these boys from these communities had issues with the police, but it was quite often the black police officers that would be a little bit more aggressive, and it'd be the ones that had trouble in the neighborhood and found some type of like authority in joining the police, and were kind of like misusing their power to sort of
Pretty
know.
much revenge.
Yeah, for some of the people that they kind of blamed for the community being the way that they were. Again, it kind of goes back to that scene with Tre's father when he's, having that discussion in Compton with all the people around, and they're all, discussing who's to blame for why the environment's the way it is. And the black police officer is just the extreme example of that, in terms of he just sees any young black male as, being culpable in this, because he's probably had so much experience of sort of seeing these black on black killings and these people, shooting each other, that in his eyes he just kind of sees it as everyone else, that that you're all involved, you're all the reason why this is the way it is. Yeah, that was quite upsetting, quite disturbing to see, because again, you would think that if you had a black police officer, it'd be maybe like the white police officer that was like maybe a little bit overzealous, and you'd be able to have the black police officer so almost like look out for you a little bit, or have your back. But no, that's just like another thing that you have to be afraid of, another thing that is a danger to you in growing up in this community.
Also, the first time the police show up is when somebody breaks into Tre's and the dad's house, right? And the guy who breaks in is also from that community, right? He's also black as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tre says something about how the father shoots at him to scare him away, and Tre says something like, "How can you miss at such a short distance?" And the guy says something like, "All it would have done is one more dead black guy on the street," something like that. That's the only thing that would have accomplished. And then the police show up, and it's the black cop who is, at that point, he's just like aggressively dismissive, essentially like grilling Furious, right? Instead of doing his job and trying to find whoever broke in, right? But like the movie goes out of its way, right? Also, the teacher in the beginning is, I think, the other white character in this, and like there's also the waiter who has one line, but in terms of actually significant characters, there's the teacher in the beginning who is trying to help Tre but is completely out of her depth, right? And all of her lines are like racist cliche bingo, where she's kind of trying to like offer like therapy and stuff like that, like just not helpful suggestions, right? That are not effective to where Tre is at, but kind of like she's well-meaning, right? She's trying to help, she's just ineffective about it. So there's not one character in this, like all the aggressors in this are internal to the community, right?
Yeah.
So that is kind of the part that made me surprised that this movie was so celebrated, because like every time I hear discourse around this, it's always like fringe voices that basically take this stance, and the majority of voices are basically rejecting this aggressively. And so I'm a little bit surprised that this movie is held in such high regard. Or
I think it's because they. I was gonna say, I think it's because they showed like two sides of it. Like, I think if it was a thing where they didn't include like the scene with the black cop, right? I then maybe I think in the black community it would have still been held in a high regard. But in terms of like universally, then maybe it might not have been held in a high regard. But I think it's because they kind of it wasn't like just attacking one side. It was kind of like showing, okay, the self-sabotage side as well of okay, black people are also the cause of what's going on in terms of suffering with obviously the black police officers. I think maybe that kind of balanced it out and created such a positive outlook when it comes to this film, and not so much on the opinion of what you're saying, where people kind of do reject those kind of movies with that kind of message.
But I don't think it's balanced. I think it's very clearly saying it's like 90%, 95% self-sabotage. like just
Yeah.
based on like as the movie's thesis and in terms of what is portrayed.
But it does also show, like, for example, with the guy who killed Ricky, it does that also does. Oh, that is self-sabotage. Actually, no, you're right. That is
Same thing, yeah.
self-sabotage. Yeah.
There's not one instance of outside aggression. There is, like, in terms of, like, you're constantly hearing the police helicopters, right?
Mm.
So that is kind of like society trying to deal with this, but we never see them, right? Like, I think I do, like, we do see the helicopters, I think, once or twice, but they don't active, like, they are not the reason why bad things are happening. They're responding to bad things that are happening within the community, right?
But it's highlighting well, for me anyways, it, you know, the reason why I hold it to such high regard is it's showing the trappings of the environment. It shows that there are, for a lot of people, it seems like there are, you know, only a few ways out of sort of, you know, how sort of out of the environment. So firstly, with Doughboy's character, it shows how, you know, you're having to be tough in the environment that you kind of grow up in, because like everyone around you is, you know, it's either you're tough or you get kind of like picked on, or you get bullied, and you know, people to kind of like take your stuff. So he had to be that voice for his brother. Essentially, he had to be sort of tough for his brother in his family, and that can quite quickly, that sort of shows how, you know, at a very young age you're sort of adopting behaviors that you see in your environment, and that can quite easily lead to you going down the path of, you know, being in and out of jail from a very young age and falling victim to the system. And again, it's just like, even in the scene when he comes back out, he's like talking about how, doesn't go outright to say it's like awful in there, but how he's saying it's like boring in there, it's whatever. While he was in there, he was like trying to read some books, trying to sort of make it out, but when he's back in the community, it's just kind of like the same cycle, and there isn't really a clear way out for him. And then you have, you know, people like Trey, who's again following his sort of college path, and he's trying to make it out that way. But even when he is trying to make it out that way, he still is having to deal with sort of the environment that he's growing up in, and essentially lost his life because of one small argument. And that's how quickly, you know, things can change. And then you have someone like, I think I meant Ricky. I don't know if I said Trey, but I think I meant Ricky. But then you have like someone like Trey, who comes from a good background, has sort of present parents there who are trying to, you know, guide him, trying to, you know, set him down the right path. And for the most part, he's not really involved, even though he's friends with Doughboy, he's not really involved in sort of what he's doing and what he's got going on. But they just grew up around each other, and they have like a mutual respect. So he's almost like flirting with that lifestyle because he's got sort of close associates to it, whilst he still, you know, has a good job, and doesn't have a good job, but he's like working at the mall. He's, you know, even like things like, he's like doing things that you wouldn't typically see a black kid do, like going fishing with his dad. It's like, you know, these unique experiences. But even someone like him, who's been set down the right path, is that one small thing can quite easily sort of bring you into that lifestyle. So like where he lost his friend Ricky, and that pain, and you know, and it's not even just that, it's the constant pain. It's having the police officers sort of shove guns in your face, even though you're not involved in anything that's going on, but you're just perceived to be because you're from that environment. So the police officers are shoving guns in your face. You're getting into some argument. You're not, you know, you're not able to sort of just go out and enjoy yourself because there's just that threat that something might just happen when you have sort of too many people from the environment in the same place, essentially. So I don't know. For me, it was just like the movie was just really probably bringing to life all these different sort of unique stories, these different, unique perspectives, even down to sort of some of the female characters as well. And forgive me because I don't know all their names, but you had like Nia Long's character, who was, you know, the good Christian, the Christian girl who abstained from from that lifestyle, tried to sort of be down the right path, wasn't just sort of giving up her body just for anyone, compared to sort of some of the other female representations you see in this, where you have like the mum who's like a drug addict whose kids just kind of like running around on the street and stuff like that. So I don't know, it just kind of painted just like a picture of like all the different sort of unique characters you'd have in this. And yes, there's the element of we are our own problems sometimes, but it's also highlighting, you know, it's highlighting how you can sort of try to get yourself out of that environment, how you can sort of try to sort of avoid some of the trappings of being in that environment. But it's also sort of highlighting how easily it is to sort of kind of fall victim to the environment that you're in, and how easy it is for things to go wrong, essentially, in those environments. You know, you can kind of like blame outside forces. And again, in sort of Tre's father's speech, Furious or whatever his name is, he's talking about sort of like, how did the guns get there, how did the drugs get there, etc. And of course, there is that influence of, you know, the outside of like, where do they put all the negative stuff, where do they put all the gun stores, where do they put all, you know, the liquor stores, etc. It's in that environment to sort of kind of set you up.
I was actually going to say that's actually one more example of self-sabotage, because that is just conspiratorial thinking that does not really help anybody, right? The reason there are gun and liquor stores at every corner is because there's demand for that, right? Like he presents it, like he's kind of bought into these conspiracy theories that these things are there because the outside world wants to sabotage them, when really they are there because there's demand for it, right? So there's not really a nefarious conspiracy going on here. Maybe that is just me reading my perspective into it, but I think getting stuff like this right or wrong can really impact your like the decisions you make in life, and that then informs how good a life you have. So in my view, like this is just my view in general, that if you fall prey to that kind of thinking, you are sabotaging yourself, because you are putting yourself on a trajectory to make bad choices, because so you misunderstand how the world works and you make choices based on that, and therefore you're more likely to make bad choices, therefore you're more likely to have a worse life in general, right? Like this has nothing to do with this specific topic, but just in general, that is what conspiracy theories do to a person. And he's kind of fallen prey into that, and for good reason, right? He has reasons for believing all of this, but I think he is kind of part of the problem in that scene, where he gives this big speech about how there's this outside conspiracy trying to undermine them. And even though he has the best of intentions and he has more resources than and more opportunities than pretty much anybody else in that, you know, in that situation, he's still falling prey to bad thinking. And I don't know if this was intended. It's just my opinion about what like conspiratorial thinking does to a person. So maybe this was not what the writers intended with this. But if they were, then there's like an irony here that the person who's the most educated, who's the most dedicated, and who's the most motivated to make things better still can't do it because of this. I don't know. That's kind of something I took away from it.
Would you say it's conspiratory thinking though? Because I mean, again, with the crack epidemic in the US, it wasn't deemed an issue, you know, whilst it was happening in the black community. It wasn't until it kind of spread into, you know, some of the whiter neighborhoods where, you know, you had the, I think it was like Reagan's war on drugs and things like that, where they actually started to sort of take initiatives against it. I don't know sort of the whole history behind it. I don't know the full story behind it, but there sort of kind of was talk about how drugs were kind of like flooded into the community, and sort of different ways that the sort of government and CIA sort of tried to destabilize the black community. And there's kind of like things out there. I'm not sort of the most well read on this. I won't sort of dive too deep on there. But it from my small knowledge, there are kind of like things in there, especially when you kind of talk about, you know, things like the Black Panthers and how the CIA was sort of trying to, you know, destabilize that and have sort of like moles in there and stuff like that, and, you know, everything that happened with Fred Hampton and stuff like that. So I know I feel like it wasn't all complete conspiratory, sort of what you were saying in that scene, but again, I don't have the full knowledge to, you know, fully flesh that out.
Yeah, so there's a few things there. The conspiracy part is not I think the part about they only started caring when the crack started hitting white neighborhoods. I don't know if that's historically the case. It sounds like it is. But that's not the conspiracy part. The conspiracy part is like there are like alcohol and guns are easily obtainable. And the reason for that is because the outside world wants us to fail. That's kind of the gist of what he's saying in that scene. And that is a conspiracy theory. What is the case is that on various stages in history, the US government has sabotaged black communities, right? The Tulsa massacre is like probably my favorite piece of American history because it's just so shocking. Like, I don't, if you've not read up on that, it's basically FBI firebombing black-owned businesses to kind of set the clock back a generation to prevent a black community from building wealth, right? It's cartoonish, but it's something that happened. So in that environment, like it's reasonable to suspect something like that going on, but then there's other parts in it that are just paranoid as well. So it is a little bit of a mixed bag. But my point is the big speech he gives in that scene where I think he confronts a couple of gang members, essentially that they are the problem, right? And like they should not be focused on each other, they should be focused on outside threats. But then the examples he gives, for the most part, are not real. He's pointing his anger at the wrong things, and if he pointed them at other things, that might do more good, is what I'm saying. So even the person who's doing the most good in this and who is the most motivated still gets it wrong, which kind of slots in with this theme of self-sabotage, right?
What do you guys want to hear what Gemini says about this conspiracy?
That the CIA kind of flooded black communities with crack.
Well, I just wrote the government. Oh, I was talking about alcohol. But I'm pretty sure this answer kind of touches upon that. Well, it kind of answers it in a way. It's a quick paragraph. So it says, while there may not be explicit government directives to put liquor stores in black communities, a complex web of systematic racism, discriminatory housing policies like redlining, economic
Redlining.
Oh yeah, that is redlining. Apologies. Economic disinvestment and permissive or poorly enforced zoning licensing laws has historically created the conditions for disproportionate clustering of alcohol outlets in these areas. This is a clear example of how structural inequities can manifest in the built environment, contributing to adverse health and social outcomes in already marginalized communities.
Yeah, which is not the same thing as the CIA is getting our kids addicted to crack, right? Which is the conspiracy theory. But it is a very popular line of thinking, right? That a lot of people subscribe to, like the part that the crack epidemic was deliberately engineered by CIA for that reason, which I, as far as I know, is not the case. But I'm not completely read up on the entire history there. I just found that scene really interesting.
Any other kind of like highlight moments from the movie for yourself? And while you're thinking, how did you feel when Ricky was gunned down in the movie? Because that's quite a famous scene, especially like the scream of like Ricky. It's like, you know, things that like people might like repeat, or it's kind of like pop culture within the black community, that particular scene. How did that hit you, and sort of what was kind of like your thoughts in that scene?
So from the minute he got the SAT results and didn't open it and went to the shop instead, I knew he was dead. That was really obviously telegraphed, I thought. The entire sequence is just a really gripping series of escalations where you can see it coming from a mile away and you know how that is going to turn out, right? Like from very early on in the sequence. And you might think that would undermine the effect of it, but I thought that created a whole like a lot of suspense, because you kind of knew something Ricky and Tre didn't know that made the sequence suspenseful. And like that entire sequence of events that ended up with Ricky shot in this back alley, I think really was really effective.
I think it hit me more because of the innocent, obviously, because he's innocent. That scene there was a representation of the dark side of living in those communities.
The pointlessness of it all, like the people who pulled that trigger gained nothing from this, right? Like there was no reason for this. It just happened, and it destroyed the lives of this boy who was on track to achieve stuff, right?
And that's the issue of a lot of like gangs as well. Like even though we understand that they do go through, you know, a lot of, you know, racism and just a lot of disadvantages, and we understand that absent fathers, and so we understand that, you know, what contributes to their life in terms of like doing criminality. However, it's also important to discuss that a lot of the times they are like, you know, attacking innocent people. I remember back in the day, so I don't know what it is like now, but back in the day it was big. Like especially like if, for example, if you wore the wrong colors, or even if you wore nice stuff and you're black, they will target you, and it's like flipping out. And I remember that was like in my area as well. Like, if you wore the wrong colors, because they were like influenced by like, I think it's like early 2000s, they were influenced by a lot by America and the gang culture over there. I remember here it's like if you wore the wrong colors, something bad could happen. I remember that's why I never wore blue, because I was in an area that was like a red bandana area. So I was thinking, Jesus Christ, which is bad. Even when I was wearing like nice stuff, times when I didn't go robbed, I said, Lord have mercy. Like, so a lot of the times I think it is that scene there was important, because I think if they just kind of like showed gang activity in a positive light, I would have said, yeah, this is completely biased. But the fact that they showed that scene of, you know, Ricky getting killed, I was like, okay, this is like, it's good. This is accurate, because we can't make it seem like, oh, being in a gang is just about brotherhood. No, sometimes there are a lot of people within gangs that like to target the innocent, especially the innocent within their own community. So, and it's sad, like Daniel says, it was over something so stupid, no reason. I think I read on Google, I said, why did the like beef between Ricky and that guy even start? And apparently, they said apparently Ricky was wearing the wrong colors, but I don't remember what color Ricky was wearing. I don't think he was wearing blue.
No,
Not too sure.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was the colors. It was the argument that they had when they went to sort of that event, and they were kind of just posturing. So, like at first, they like barged past Ricky, and he.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I don't know why he intentionally barged past him, because he intentionally did that, and then that's why I saw, and that's what Google said, because Ricky might be wearing blue, but I don't think that's true. But that's what I was wondering. I don't know why he even barged him in the first place. That's what I was wondering. Like what the hell?
Like to me,
why did he do
to me, it was all posturing. It was all sort of them just trying to show who was bigger than the other. And again, you had like Doughboy, pulling out his gun and sort of kind of like using that as like I'm the guy here, like, don't even like mess with me or whatever. And then obviously they then show off as well, and like shooting a gun in the air and stuff. And it's all again just pretty dumb stuff as to why he ended up getting shot. And what I actually quite liked about that scene as well was kind of the naivety of both Ricky and Tre in that situation, because again they were flirting with that with the lifestyle, not completely in it, but they had sort of kind of close relations to sort of people that were involved in like gangs and sort of violence and stuff like that. So like when they saw the car and they sort of managed to get away the first time, they didn't really perceive the danger of it. They kind of, again, just like assumed it was just like posturing or whatever. And they just assumed it was just like them just like trying to show who's the bigger man. And it was like nothing serious. Whereas like Doughboy and the friends that were on the porch kind of immediately sensed the danger and immediately sensed that there's something different about this situation. And they'd be like, grab their guns and sort of kind of like drove around and went to go find his brother. And again, that just like highlights the difference between people in the community, is that whilst he understands that they are somewhat of a threat, he didn't quite understand the full extent of sort of the interaction that they had in that place and how it could sort of lead to him being shot. Whereas Doughboy and his gang knew that because they were coming around, it meant that someone could sort of seriously be harmed or be killed in that situation. So yeah, I think the movie did well in that sense as well.
One more thing as well. One more thing quickly. I think also like the scene, I think there was like foreshadowing going on in the scene when they were small, like little, and then Ricky got his ball taken, and then when he looked back, hoping that the gang member would give back his ball, and then he did end up giving back his ball. I think that scene there, maybe not foreshadowing, but it showed Ricky's innocence there, and then obviously his brother Doughboy's reaction to that. He says, "You're such a, I think, P word or something like that."
Even before that, I don't remember which of the kids said it when they went to go see the dead body. I think one of them mentioned is that a bullet doesn't have a name on it, and that essentially is the case in this situation. Is that just being in this environment could quite easily lead you to getting shot, and that was kind of like foreshadowed from the very start of the movie, essentially.
And also, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think also with Ricky, maybe there was some foreshadowing going on, because obviously the way that Doughboy reacted, his innocence was okay. That shows his innocence, and at the same time, the way Doughboy reacted, okay, you're not gonna make it reacting like that. You're gonna have to do what Doughboy tried to do and actually fight the guy and get the ball back. Do you know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm looking too much into it. I might be reaching, but
honestly, that's what actually got him killed, was him when the guy barged past him and he sort of kind of reacted to it and sort of shouted and postured to him. Like essentially, from there they saw his face, remembered his face, and then they came back and killed him a few days later. Actually, Daniel, any highlights? Any like favorite scenes, highlights, or favorite things that you took away from this movie?
I liked Tre's parents a lot. Like every time they interacted, you could really see their frustration and almost desperation. Like where they realized what was at stake if they made a mistake or if they dropped the ball just once, right? And there's a few different ones. When Reva drops Tre off with the father, they have this little talk in the car, right? And I don't remember exactly what was said there, but like clearly their marriage didn't work out, right? And clearly there's history between them, but they're united in their mission to be good parents, right? And give Tre every chance he has, right? Then when they meet in the restaurant, there's a similar thing going on where they really don't see eye to eye, but they are working together and they are doing what they can. And when Furious discovers that Tre has gone out on this revenge trip to I think to go after the Bloods after they shoot Ricky. He's just holding. I think he finds the gun that Tre had, and he's kind of just sitting there and kind of realizing that or everything he's done kind of just evaporated into air because of one split second decision that Tre made. And he ends up not going through with it, right? And like he separates from the group before they actually do kill the rivals, right? The rival gang members. But like just that despair and furious as he was kind of realizing that Tre had snuck out to join his friends on this revenge trip. That was really powerful, I thought.
I thought actually the most powerful moment as well from that was when Tre came back in the house, and every other time the father had some type of lesson or had something to say to him, but it was just that disappointment where he kind of just like went into his room and just like closed the door because he's like, what else can you say? Like, he didn't have anything else to say. I thought that was like quite poignant. Any other thoughts at all about the movie, Jonathan, Daniel?
I think everything was said. I enjoyed this film. I definitely, because I haven't seen it in a long time actually, so it was refreshing to actually watch it, and I do understand why this was culturally groundbreaking film.
So there's kind of my question: does it actually break ground, or is it just really good? Like, are
So
there really no other movies that do this?
many movies do this, but this one, what's the reckon? It was recognized. Right? It was recognized for. So it says in 2002, the United States Library of Congress deemed it culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant and selected it for the preservation in the National Film Registry, cementing its place as a seminal work in American cinema. And also, obviously, within the Black community, a lot of this is referenced a lot. And just like the cultural impact that it did have in cinema for like Black movies and stuff was a big thing.
And I think it's like one of the first of its kind where it's like really highlighting some of the Black experience in America or in some of these environments. And it kind of spawned quite a few movies that came after it as well. So I think the other quite notable one is Menace to Society, which is kind of held in similar regard and is sort of kind of like neck and neck as to which one's better out of the two, and that only came out a few years afterwards. I think this one had like a big impact as well. I think it only had like a 6.5 million budget, ended up grossing over sort of 50 million worldwide, if I remember correctly. So it was sort of seen as a big success. But to my knowledge, I don't think I can tell a movie that came before this, which was like of its kind and sort of really delved into sort of the inner workings of like an inner city sort of Black community in America.
I'm just trying to think back. Like, I was 5 years old in '91, so I would not have experienced movies like this like at the time, right? But I do remember in the '90s, the kinds of things that got a lot of airtime were things like, what's that Michelle Pfeiffer movie where she goes into a Black neighborhood to teach high school,
Freedom
and
Riders.
I don't know.
Or it might be Paradise. What's that song? Gangsters
The
Paradise.
song is Gangsta's Paradise. I don't. But the
Yeah.
movie's called something else. I've forgotten now. Stuff like this, right? Where you're kind of looking into that community from the outside, and here it's just completely self-contained. And I think that is different. And I don't know how many other movies like that. I know that this inspired a whole bunch of movies like this, right? Menace to Society is one of them. I've not seen that one, but that gets always quoted as being coming in the wake of this, right? It seems like I don't know the history well enough to really speak authoritatively on this, but it seems like in '91 this was new ground, probably.
Yeah, to my knowledge, again, I wouldn't say that I've got like the extensive history to say if anything came before this, but to my knowledge, this was sort of kind of like one of the first ones and definitely groundbreaking for its time in 1991. But if anyone knows of anything that came before this one or any movies similar that did a similar type of story before Boys in the Hood, maybe not as successfully because this one took all the acclaims and this success, let us know in the comment section.
It looks like we've reached the end of today's discussion. Guys, if you've been with us all the way through, thank you very much for listening in.
Let us know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Have you seen Boys in the Hood? What was your thoughts of the movie? Let us know your thoughts. Of course, if you liked everything that we discussed today and you enjoyed our discussion, tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were talking a bunch of nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
Thank you very much, guys, and we'll catch you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.